these old variety crab apples on my property, and
those are
like
nasty.
Johnny Appleseed kind of deal. And that's what apples effectively used to be.
We used to throw those at each other.
Yeah. We make cider out of it, and it turns pretty good for that. But if you pull up like a image of what an original banana looks like,
oh, they're ridiculous.
It's all seed, and it's tiny and it's all seeds, and there's hardly any edible structure to it. And so if you look at most of the fruit that was available kind of pre-agriculture and that selective breeding of fruit, like it was much smaller, it wasn't as sweet. And again, it's not to say that you shouldn't have any of that stuff, but it's just, there was an interesting piece that came out of the UK where it was looking at feeding kids fruit. They were like, let's recommend that these kids eat fruit. And the kids already had a hypercaloric diet. They were eating too much. They were eating too many carbs. And then they threw fruit on top of it. And they're like, wow, adding fruit to this already shitty overeating program made it worse, And it was like there was going to be some sort of magic that came out of adding some fruit to this story, whereas the kids just needed to pull more of the junk out and get some sort of both caloric control and some carbohydrate control.
That's really interesting. Is there any fruit that is in its original state? Like maybe pomegranates. They kind of
berries are pretty. Blueberries, blackberries, those sorts
especially
of things. I think are pretty.
Ones, right?
Yeah. They're pretty similar to.
Have you had wild
original.
Blueberries?
Yeah.
Not that sweet.
Not that sweet.
No. Different flavor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've picked them like in the wild, like in the backcountry,
right?
Like a blueberry, and it's just like, this is.
It's not bad, but it's not spectacular. Yeah.
It's not what you're used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But oranges, clearly, they've been fucked with.
Right.
Yeah. Apples. Like we were on a trip once and we bought these apples and they were literally like the size of a softball.
Right.
And you bite into it. It's like the most delicious dessert you could ever have. I'm like, this can't be a fucking real regular apple.
Right.
Something's been going on.
Chernobyl apple.
I mean, how much of our food, especially of our fruit, how much of it is genetically altered? It's got to be massive amounts.
Yeah. And that GMO story, I'm in a spot where I usually piss everybody off about it because I am way less concerned about genetic modification of these things and more concerned about some of the business practices that happen. Like we've been doing selective breeding for thousands of years, and that has modified the genetics. Back to the wolf turning into dog story. Like that's
tomatoes, everything. And without, the classic thoughts of Frankenfoods.
Right.
Meaning laboratory, some sort of injection into that's not what's going on. Selective breeding for the most part.
Yeah, most of it's selective breeding. And the thing about GMO too is the apologists for it. Like when you look at the results that you get with the GMO, the genetic modification, it's really unimpressive. I mean, it's not like dramatically increasing yields. What it inevitably is doing is creating something that's usually more resistant to Roundup than what the last thing was.
Roundup being that pesticide that everyone's terrified
which is legitimately some pretty nasty stuff. And so it doesn't really seem to be working any type of magic as far as like feeding the world or anything like that. It is creating a funnel where in order to grow this thing, you need more chemical fertilizer input, you need more pesticide input, and it just seems to be this feed-forward mechanism on that. And so I'm really, from a health standpoint, I'm not that freaked out about GMOs just as a baseline, but from a really shady business practice, I'm not a big fan. From actually moving the needle on food production, it's really unimpressive to me. So my position on GMOs usually just makes everybody mad because I'm not really jumping into either one of these camps whole hog.
Well, food production in general, when you look at these gigantic, large-scale farms, that is one of the most unnatural things you're ever going to see in life.
Right.
These giant cornfields.
Right.
That's so unnatural.
Right. Monocrop.
And not only the monocrop, but those are genetically modified monocrops, and you want to kill off all the weeds. So you're spraying your genetically modified monocrops with some shit that kills off everything but your genetically modified monocrops, and who knows what that consequence is on the human body.
Well, Roundup is now being suggested or has been suggested for a long time as a mitochondrial disruptor, similar to that antibiotic story. So this is where people, the last questions about like, well, what about this gluten intolerance thing? Like people didn't have it 50 years ago. Why is it going on now? And we really don't know, but maybe it's antibiotics, maybe it's changes in the gut microbiome. But a lot of this stuff seems to have a mitochondrial dysfunction piece to it. Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, they all seem to have mitochondrial dysfunction elements to them. The mitochondria is not producing energy the way that it should. And back again to that point about being flexible with our fuel systems, people seem to be becoming inflexible in their fuel systems. And this ketotic state may be the default that we're able to go back to be able to maintain some degree of health. And it also seems to press a reset button in the mitochondria where we get apoptosis and cell death in abnormal cells. But the need for people to shift towards a lower carb diet may be reflective of some changes in the environment where we're being made sick by things like glyphosate or maybe over aggressive antibiotic use. And then the thing that we need to default back to be able to be healthy is some sort of a low carb or ketogenic diet.